But so
Yeah.
I'll like to change gears a little because you I mean I don't want to recapitulate because that's a very broad sort of
Forgive me.
please sir. Yeah. So that's a very broad sort of picture you paint, sir. So I don't wish to recapitulate. Maybe as the discussion moves forward, I'll pick up a few parts because what comes next is a little deep diving into some of the parts. To begin with, sir, one of the things in your writings, again, a certain mark of your heterodox sort of positions has been how would India relate its manufacturing sector? How does India, and that is what you were saying, how much do we produce as part of the global manufacturing merchandise, sort of goods and merchandise, basically. And we are at quite dismal levels, given that we have been aiming for being a sort of manufacturing hub for at least 35 years. Uh, uh, we have been complaining about our exports. I think in 2002 plan sort of commission, the 10th planning commission, we were complaining about our exports. We are still complaining about our exports. We are not doing that great with our merchandise exports. Uh, you have, sir, have had a very interesting approach towards the question of manufacturing. You have, on the one hand, cautioned against again too much external sort of orientation of the manufacturing sector in terms of investment, in terms of exports, but also you have sort of leveraged the manufacturing sector for exports in terms of rectifying what you call the the role of labor intensive manufacturing sort of in the country. You have argued that the capital intensity, which some sort of scholars such as C. Veeramani and others, they call it idiosyncratic. I think in 2006 also it was being called. We noticed that we had a very idiosyncratic sort of specialization in terms of merchandise exports. Today, sir, the world trade is completely the landscape of trade, international trade is completely different. What is your reading, sir, of what is happening? Can we still have the same goals of labor intensive fueled export growth, basically, the East Asian export growth model, basically? Uh, do we need a new trade policy? Has the government started already aligning its trade policy with with the changes that we are undergoing? Or again, as you say, we have not had an industrial policy, so you think that we don't have an industrial trade policy also. What is your position on these things, sir?
I will give you two sets of answers to your question. I'm very clear about the question you're asking and what our approach needs to be. So, when I continue to emphasize the need for a refocus on labor intensive manufacturing, I'm mainly thinking of servicing the Indian, local, domestic, the national market.
Right,
There is a very high latent demand for simple manufactured goods,
right,
which were which were being serviced over the period 2004 to 14, and we write about it in an article in Economic and Political Weekly in 2014. I would urge your readers to go back to that, and we discuss that in my Reviving Jobs book, which you just spoke about, Penguin 2025, and then my forthcoming book, also with Bloomsbury London, called India Out to Work. You see, if we are to become a great manufacturing nation, we cannot hope to do it only on the strength of exports.
right,
In the last analysis, exports as a proportion of India's large economy at its peak never exceeded 25%. In
right,
2007-8, it peaked at 25%. It is now down to about 20%.
right,
And the history of the recent decline I've already explained to you. Please understand that in China also, that the share of exports to GDP was also in 2007-8 25%. It's another matter that because in the 90s and since, the Chinese economy has grown much faster than ours, despite the fact that we began at the same level of per capita income in 1990. Because it's grown much faster, their 25% is a much higher share of total manufacturing in the world. The point, and the point is that they could do that because there was growing demand across the globe for simple manufactured labor intensive goods.
Right.
That period of growth in the world economy has sort of passed. The Europe and North America, Japan are growing slower now. Their populations have aged to a much greater extent than 20 years ago when China was growing and expanding its exports.
Right.
And the fact remains that, and I hear this repeatedly when I'm in Europe or North America, that the world will not be able to accept another China in the form of India, in the
Right.
sense of exports of goods, because
Right.
the absorption capacity doesn't exist.
Has gone down. Right.
However, that doesn't mean that we must not, that we should not lose sight of the need for expanding our exports uh, to Latin America, where incomes are much higher. The vast majority of Latin America is upper middle income. And I think there is concern uh, about the US market and the European market in most Asian economies, and they will end up diversifying towards Latin America, Africa, and other Asian countries. The Chinese are already doing that, and we need to do the same. Having said that, we must also sustain and increase our export earnings through services exports, in which we do have a comparative advantage.
Right. Right.
All of this is necessary if we are to ensure that our current account deficit remains within limits. And in any case, I think we are doing okay also because our stock market is doing okay. So, except for some periods when our stock market is overheated, when foreign portfolio investors pull out money from our economy, they're still net, there's still a net inflow taking place. Secondly, we are we should be reasonably confident that remittances will continue, and they have grown very significantly. So actually, on our overall balance of payments, we will remain reasonably in a reasonably good position. Notice I have so far said not a word about FDI.
Right.
There is a reason, because unlike in China, which attracted massive amounts of FDI
Right.
amounting to 4% of their GDP, we have never exceeded FDI inflows as a share of GDP beyond 2% of GDP.
Right.
Only in the period from 2004 to 14, it slightly went over 2% of GDP. Despite the increase in gross FDI until 2 or 3 years ago,
Right.
uh, 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 in the last 10 years, gross FDI has also never exceeded 2% of GDP.
Right. Right.
Okay. So don't get impressed or blown away by the government narrative of, oh, look at the amount of FDI in gross terms.
Right.
Because what that hides is something else. You see, overall, the investment to GDP ratio in the last 10 years has come down very
Mm.
sharply.
Yeah.
from the investment to GDP ratio that prevailed from 2004 to
4 to
14.
14. Right.
Over that period, the range was 32 to 38%. Never in the history of our country had that level of investment rate been sustained
Right.
for a 10-year period. In the last 10 years, the investment to GDP ratio has been in the range of 26 to 32%.
Right.
A sharp fall, which is what explains the growth rate fall, GDP growth rate. Now, you can imagine that if FDI is just under 2% of GDP, then even if you round off your total investment to GDP at 30%, what is 2%?
Hmm.
It's 1/15th.
Right. Right.
You get the point.
Right.
So point. So I mean, so one you can see immediately that in all large economies, FDI cannot be that important. I don't want to take away from the overall importance for the economy of FDI flows, because it not only brings in just financial capital, it also brings in technology, marketing expertise, and
Right.
third, market access.
Right. Right.
And that's really what the China export story was about. The other three, not the financial
Right.
uh,
Right. Right.
flows. Now, the other thing that has happened in our economy is that, because you know that one reason why jobs are not growing in the non-farm sector is because our own private investment is
Lacking.
teetering between 26 and 32. Now, in that, what has happened is that net FDI is not as is very small now. In the
Right.
last several years, in it's actually been very small, and in FY25, believe it or not, it was only just over $400 million. Forget about billions. Why?
Right.
Because several things have happened in the last financial year, and this is not just last several years it has been happening. One, foreign firms have been selling their stake. Hyundai sold their stake. Others have sold their stake. Ford had done that. You remember?
Yeah.
Uh,
General Motors
General
also.
Motors did that.
General Motors did that. Yeah.
Others, others did that. Not just that. Indian big corporates have been, and high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals have been taking money abroad.
Abroad.
They've
Yeah.
been settling abroad. They have been taking their capital abroad. So they might be investing abroad. They're not investing here. Why are they not investing here? Because market size is not growing. There
Right.
is a limit to how long you can sustain growth rates on the basis of demand from barely 10%, top 10% of the population.
Right.
That's the problem. And that is where the solution will also lie. So let me stop there. Now you understand the
I
nuances in my emerging
right.
view.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right. In fact, sir, this is very interesting because recently we were in talk with what you call some government economists, and to be very specific, Dr. Arvind Zirmani, and there is a large opinion. There's a very strong opinion that uh, not in these emerging markets, but we should have our sort of exports being serviced to what you call the high income sort of what are the high income countries, which what you very rightly point uh, are seeing there's not much absorption sort of happening over there. So there's a very cautious sort of approach also towards why FDIs are important, why these external linkages are important, because of not how do you say not what the commonsensical notion of it is. Again, we have what you call that General Motors going, Ford going. There has also been a very large concern that the investments which were coming in were actually in the form of mergers and acquisitions, not really in greenfield sort of
correct.
investments. Uh,
Absolutely right.
uh,
Absolutely
so I mean, we regardless were not even seeing the FDI playing the function that it was playing maybe in China.
correct.
Uh,
In China,
Uh,
exactly. The greenfield sites were not getting the
right,
investment.
right,
And a lot of FDI came uh, into real estate, it also into services,
right,
into software and so on. It didn't come into manufacturing much,
right. So I think that
except
puts,
in some increases in automobiles. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. That was one sector, which was a sort of growth sector. But then again, there's only so much that it can grow if there's not effective demand.
precisely,
And we are seeing
precisely,
that. We are seeing that. So
precisely.
I just have a couple of questions because I don't think I have much of your time. One question which which I think was there in the first part that you were answering. Uh, Also something that you've been very intimately sort of associated with, the skilling issue. You've been writing a lot over it lately. You have been, in fact, writing since 2014, but lately some of your very interesting papers, some of your very interesting findings one can read. Uh, and you were talking about how there was a certain how do you say success of the structural transformation when we were seeing absorption into, for example, the construction industry booming up till a certain point of time, and there was a certain scope if the skilling program, which was already introduced quite late within the Indian sort of policy in a coherent policy form in India, but there was a certain scope that if implemented properly, this would have aided the sort of transformation or the change from the low skill towards medium skill or high skill sort of sectors, even if it meant towards your factory jobs and labor intensive jobs. Uh, so, what do you think? I mean, one of my questions with regards to skill is, and you have been involved with it. There's a huge sort of from I think 2015 was the first time we sort of adopt the national skill sort of mission, right? Why is it not? Where do you think we are with the skilling program, sir? Or has it, like, do we have to completely reimagine it? Because when you're saying this problems of the reverse structural sort of transformation, I think that there is not enough coverage or even intent in these sort of policy frameworks anymore. Where do you think we are going wrong with our skilling sort of policies, sir?
Massively. Where I will explain in a minute. Because the approach is unfortunately without a vision and without an understanding of what the structural problem is.
Right,
You see, um, let me back up to um, where I was talking about the significant increase in enrollments in both school education and
right,
higher education that took place, and you got a massification of both school and higher education taking place uh, from the mid 90s up until the middle of this last decade.
right,
You got very rapid massification of first schooling and then higher education.
right,
When such rapid massification takes place in such a large education system, you see following kind of phenomena. The first and the most important thing that you will see is a rapid decline in quality and of learning level.
right,
So, how does a massification take place? I will come to skills because you have to understand the crisis in the education system
right.
before you understand the crisis in skills.
Skills, right,
So, because after all, the education and skills ecosystem provides the labor supply
right.
or generates the workforce that is going to be absorbed in the economy, whether in the informal or the formal
Formal.
sector, remains to be seen depending upon whether the jobs are growing or not. So so far we've been talking only about the economy and its potential for generating jobs. Therefore, we've only been talking about the demand for labor, not
Right.
talking about the
The supply.
quantity or the supply, the quality of labor that is being generated by the education and skills ecosystem. So it's critical to understand the problems of the skills ecosystem, uh, and those can be understood only if you understand the crisis in the education system.
Right.
The big crisis in the education system is not simply that a massification took place. You have to understand how that massification took place and why
Right.
the quality decline was inevitable.
Right.
The first way that this increase takes place is that there was a very sharp increase in secondary private enrollment. And that because demand grew as the public sector investment in school education up to elementary increased, you first got universal net enrollment ratio at primary level, then at upper primary level. So by 2007, no, 8, 9, you had universalized elementary education up to class 8. And then you got upward pressure, and from 2010 to 2015, you were able to universalize, even secondary education, classes
Education.
11 and 10 and 9 and 10.
Right.
Now, the point is that this happened on account of the rapid expansion of private secondary education.
Right.
Now, the capacity of the government system to monitor, to evaluate, to regulate private sector in the school system has remained limited because the government simply doesn't build its own officer staff capabilities and capacity.
Right. Right.
Secondly, you got massification in higher education, and look how did that happen. In the year 2000, there were about 10,000 affiliated colleges affiliated to state universities or central universities. That number today stands at apparently 58,000
Right.
affiliated colleges,
Right.
mostly in the private sector.
Yeah. Yeah.
You think any state government or state university or the UGC or AICTE, which
Mhm.
supposed to regulate engineering and management institutions and pharmacy and hotel management, etc., institutions, essentially technical institutions
Education.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
education,
Yeah.
of higher education. You think any of them have either the financial wherewithal or the capability among their staff to monitor and regulate? No,
No. Right.
they don't. So what you get is massification being carried out by builders, contractors, politicians, Lala Popatlal College of Management,
Right.
Devi Popatlal Institute of Engineering,
Right.
and so on every other street as you radiate out of Delhi, radiate out of Mumbai, or drive out of Hyderabad or Bangalore. The result is massification without quality.
Right.
The end product is unemployable young people emerging.
Right.
Now, in this context, what is happening? What is Asar report telling us repeatedly? Children can't read,
Great.
and they are
And
coming out as being essentially unemployable. Engineering, I mean, India skill reports say half of our engineers coming out from the engineering colleges are unemployable.
right.
Why are they unemployable? Because if you get massification through the Lala Popatmal type of college, then
Right.
the teachers are not there. The teachers are all contractual, they're running from one college to another. So the colleges essentially, the new colleges become a way of converting people, contractors and politicians and retired bureaucrats, black money into white,
Right.
and and recycling that black money
Right.
while the certification happens. And then these young people think that they have a certificate and a degree or an education, and therefore they are deserving of a formal sector and even maybe a government job.
Right.
Their aspirations rise, but their capabilities do not.
Right.
Now, to this, you add a government financed, government managed skills ecosystem, meaning technical and vocational education and training.
Right. Right.
Half educated young people are coming out, and then you offer them not long term skill development as ITIs, the old ITIs offer,
Right.
because the massification then happens in the skills ecosystem also. Let me give you some examples.
Right.
In the year 2007, there were under 2000 ITIs in the public sector, under 2000 ITIs in the private sector. You know what the total number of ITIs today is? Government ITIs is still only 2,500. Private ITIs has gone to about 13,000. Total ITI number is over 15,000. You think any of the institutions, the Ministry of Skill Development, the NCVT, which are all these so-called authorizing approval institutions at the union line ministry level, or any of the officers in the sectors, sorry, the state skill missions, the SSM
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
state level, do they,
Yeah.
you think any of them have the capacity to monitor any of the ITIs that have been created? As though that's not bad enough. I mean, and there's been parliamentary uh, standing committee of labor of the parliament reports on these ITIs, and they expose them. As though that, and that, please understand that ITIs are the only long running training programs. By
Right.
long running, I mean 1 year, 2 year, and in some cases
Courses.
3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The teachers in these places are simply people who have come out of the ITIs themselves, and they are all on contract. They are poorly educated themselves. They have no jobs experience themselves. They have no industry experience. How much
Right.
training are they even capable of doing? As
Right.
though this is not bad enough. What has happened in the last 10 odd years is the following: that in the hurry to in line with the 2015 National Skills Policy goal of skilling 400 million people between 2015 and 2022,
Right.
400 million.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, 2015, you probably, your total workforce was only about 400 million.
400.
So I don't know what government was thinking when they were writing this document. Um, but I'll tell you what the breakup of this 400 million is, because I've read Appendix 4 of the National Skills Policy of 2015. And it says that of the 400, 100 million will be 100 million will be young people being trained who are fresh entrants into the labor force, and 300 million will be those who are already in the informal workforce, and they need to be
Recognized.
what is called RPL.
Yeah.
They already have skills. Their skills and informal training has to be certified and recognized, and that is called recognition of prior
And
learning.
learning.
I have written very recently a paper with two other experts, Indian experts, on recognition of prior learning, because while RPL has happened, it has been done very poorly by another institution that was created in 2010 called the National Skill Development Corporation,
Right.
which
Right.
was supposed to be a private public partnership, never became that. The CII, FICCI, ASSOCHAM never came good on their promise of actually joining hands with the government. They
Right.
didn't put any money at all. Ultimately, the ball fell in the government's court. In 2015, the MSDE was created, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. and the NSDC became part of the
Okay.
MSDE, having been transferred from the Ministry of Finance, which is where the NSDC had been created as an independent sort of
Right.
semi-private body. Now, what was the NSDC? What was the NSDC's function? It was created with two objectives. One, to incubate private skill training providers,
Right.
not
Right.
employers, but private skill training providers, standalone, not necessarily connected to any. The
Right.
second thing NSDC was charged to do was to incubate sector skill councils as a means of bringing in employers and industry in the
Right.
process of skill development and
Right.
getting them to engage in. The NSDC went about doing both. Today, there are about 6,000 private VTPs or vocational training providers
Yeah.
in
Right.
the country, spread out across the country. Who, what do? All of them provide short-term training only.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Now, imagine the following situation. You have a 8th or 10th class pass young person from a government school, and I've already described to you that this young person is barely half educated.
Right. Right. The
His or her
quality wise.
learning levels are poor.
Right.
They're usually from a poor family background, often from rural areas and from poor urban backgrounds. They enter these places hoping that they will acquire a skill in 3 months.
Right.
Well,
Right.
you can, a half educated young person, you are quarter skilling them because you can only skill anyone young person who has had poor education very poorly, and therefore you quarter skill them. And I don't believe that you can skill anyone with a course of 3 months. You have to skill people for at least a year because you need to provide these young people, some bridge courses so that they begin to learn.
Right.
They
Right.
begin to learn how to learn,
Right. Right.
so
Right.
that some of the weaknesses of their education, their schooling them itself are corrected for,
Right.
and then they acquire skills. And also, our one major weakness of our skills ecosystem that has been created by the government, and it's been government funded, and it's being supply driven, and it's pretty much government funded and managed by the state government as well, under the umbrella of the institutions created by the MSDE, is that employer and industry engagement is very limited.
Limited. Yeah.
Very limited. Now, why am I saying that? Because until recently, there was no requirement for an internship for these NSDC trained
Right.
VTP trainees.
The placement
An
component of that.
internship or an apprenticeship is absolutely essential because these young people have no job experience.
Right.
And it's not enough to, you know, give them theory lessons. And even if there is a workshop in the ITI or the VTP, if you don't actually equip them to go into a job role in a with a proper employer, small scale or large scale, then they are unfit to become formal sector employees.
Right. Right.
Why was the skill ecosystem expanded with government money? With the objective of training young people who would become formal sector employees.
Right.
Our formal sector had not been creating jobs because we just don't have enough young people with the requisite skills. The
Right.
formal sector has grown rapidly because the Chinese had educated the young, given them training. The Vietnamese had done the same. We did not do either of the two.
Right.
And then our young aspire to get a private formal sector job. Well, they are not employable. It's not, and
Right.
it's not their fault.
Right.
So
Right.
what I'm saying is that the government needs to recognize all these various things and correct for all of this. Now, what this means in the last analysis, Yugang, is that the government needs to step back and realize that the international experience tells us that demand driven systems are most effective in the space of TVET, vocational education training.
Right. Right.
While we have built a supply driven, a
Right.
supply driven system by definition is a government financed, government managed
Right. Right.
system. And all the pillars of the ecosystem, whether you have ITIs or school level vocational education being offered from class 9 onward, or these VTPs,
Right.
or the tool rooms of the Ministry of MSMEs, or the MORD, Ministry of Rural Development, Deen Dayal Upadhyay, all these are government driven programs.
Right. Yep.
And where is the employer engagement? The employers also, especially the large corporates, they have not been made to, you know, you know, feel that they are engaged. They have to have skin in the teeth. If their skin is not in the teeth of the skill ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
skin meaning they have to have put their money where their mouth is. They
Right.
can't keep complaining we don't get skilled people.
Right.
But what have you done about it is what is the question that the government needs to ask, and we as independent analysts need to ask.
Right.
Because the international experiences from starting from Germany to Austria to Switzerland to China to Korea to Malaysia to Brazil is that where these countries have actually built ecosystems where the employers and industry are engaged and they put their money where their mouth is
Right.
and they don't rely on government. Because you cannot complain that we don't find people and yet say, oh, the government doesn't know how to train people. Well,
Right.
then if the government doesn't, and the government is not expected to know, why is it
Exactly.
not expected to know? That the government doesn't provide the job. The
Exactly.
jobs are provided by the private sector.
Right.
Then, so obviously the employers who know how to train, who should know how to train, then get in. Then the logical inference to be drawn is that employers should engage in the process.
Right.
And if they feel that the government is not doing its job well, then this has to be brought to the notice of the government. But you
Right.
have to have the spine to be able to tell both the bureaucrat and the minister that, look, we are not satisfied with what we are getting,
Mm.
and we want to come in and see how we can help you.
Right.
And the government has to be open to that.
Right.
It is a थाली ताली दो हाथ से बजती है ना, तो दोनों हाथों को साथ में लाना पड़ेगा. तो कौन लाएगा? सरकार लाएगी.
Right. So, whatever you have been saying with the skill sort of ecosystem, something again, which I think uh, I really have been wanting to ask you, reading your works, uh, is that for you, the problems of development, the problems of bad planning, and the problems of development are not something which are very mechanical in terms of people won't have better access to healthcare, people won't have access to affordable housing, people won't have access to jobs. But it comes also, it becomes a very compounded social problem whenever you have been writing about it. I think, uh, in fact, just to sort of draw one reference throughout your writing, you take 2012 and 14 as one of the periods up till when the Indian economy was still moving in the right direction. And yet, it is the same period when we see, at least talking about the manufacturing sector, we see a lot of industrial sort of conflict happening, at least in some sectors, some of the most booming sectors, which actually urges me to sort of read that. even if everything was going right, even if sort of all the pieces are in the right place, there is something called expectations, and something what you are also talking about when you're talking about the skilling ecosystem and the young people getting into it, and their aspirations running higher than the qualification that they have, and for both, neither of the workers and the people are not responsible. uh, what do you think, given that the course correction doesn't happen? What do you think are the problems of bad planning and the missed opportunity?
Absolutely correct.
What will happen, sir? What do
There
you
have been
predict?
missed opportunities for the last 35 years. I
Right,
blame I blame all governments. Let me
right,
explain.
right, sir.
Let me explain. I'm explaining. There have been two foundational problems which I write about regularly also. The first is that since 1991 we haven't had an industrial strategy, despite the fact that after 2008 100 countries adopted industrial policies, and more must have done so in the more recent years.
Right,
Already between 2008 and 18, UNCTAD told us that 100 countries had adopted industry.
right,
We finally uh, articulated in the 12th five-year plan in 2012 an industrial policy. Unfortunately, that never got implemented.
right, right.
The government changed. The current government has never had an industrial strategy. Make in India is not a
Okay.
industrial strategy. Performance linked incentive is the opposite of what the Chinese succeeded in doing and the East Asians did. So there are many problems, which is why most of the PLI programs are not going to be extended after the 5 years are over. I think we are getting very clear signals about that.
Right, sir.
And that's problem number one, that governments in the last 35 years have had a manufacturing strategy, and nor have they had an employment policy associated with that, because what the the challenge now is much greater, Yugan,
Right,
in the last 10 years or so, because the numbers who are joining the labor force is gone. I mean, we need to has gone up because they are getting better educated, their aspirations are increasing. We have to
right,
pull workers out of agriculture. There are millions more unemployed. There are 100 million not in education, employment, or training, which are the youth who are
right,
so-called neets, who are looking for work but not, and therefore have become discouraged workers. All these people have to be provided jobs. So we need to generate not the 7.5 million new non-farm jobs that we were generating earlier, and that sufficed then. Now we have to generate 11 million new non-farm jobs each year. We are actually generating only half of that, about 6 million.
right,
So that is an industrial policy plus an employment policy is a minimum. Point one. Point
right,
two, I think our conversation should have indicated to you that it's not the success story of China and the Southeast Asian economies, which uh, became fast-growing economies and have been extremely successful in reducing poverty and pulling workers out of agriculture. Not only had an industrial policy, they had a very robust education policy which ensured quality schooling and then quality TVET,
right,
quality vocational and skill education, where
right,
employers and industry were engaged. So unless we have a newfound focus on both labor intensive manufacturing, which brings a newfound focus on MSMEs, which have suffered, which are the ones which generate non-farm jobs, a newfound focus on cluster development. There are 5,500 clusters of manufacturing
right,
across the country.
right,
Some
right,
4,000 of them are handloom and handicraft. Some
right,
1,500 of them are modern industry clusters. The MSME ministry has to be strengthened to afford much greater finances and technology skills and finances through SIDBI to the clusters. Unless all of this is goes into the package of an industrial policy,
Policy. Right.
and unless we think much more seriously about improving the quality of our schooling, and that learning improves, vacant posts of teachers across states are filled.
Right.
There
Right.
are lakhs of schools without teachers in Bihar, in UP, and if there is such heavy migration out of these such states, if there is, uh, you know, very still, these are the two major states of India which have still high TFR, total
Right.
fertility rate, high
Right.
population growth rate. The rest of the
Right.
country, including the other Hindi belt states, have managed to reduce their population. Unless all these things are focused upon, you will not get the quality of education that the country needs and the
Right.
manufacturing sector needs.
Right.
And if you don't get quality youngsters then joining the labor force, then even MSMEs will only give them informal jobs and not give them formal jobs.
Right.
The large corporates will not employ them. Please
Right.
understand, the large corporate sector has been transformed in the last 10 years very significantly in the following sense: that there has been a heavy growth of concentration of industries by the top five biggest corporates in the country.
Right.
Their market concentration across sectors has grown. First, they increased the number of sectors in which they have spread out, and I'm
Right.
talking about the Reliance Group, the Adani Group, the Aditya Birla Group, Bharti Mittal Group, and um, uh, what's the fifth one? Forgive me. Tata, obviously, Tata. These five have grown across the sectors,
Right.
and having grown across the sectors, the number of sectors in which they are dominating, they have increased their ownership within that sectors. They have grown at the expense of
Right.
existing
Right.
operators.
Right.
And
Right.
so their profits have grown. The top corporates' profits have grown, and their
Right.
investments have not grown.
Right. Right.
So if
Right.
investments don't grow, your private industry tends to stagnate. If investments start, then the demand has stagnated for the bottom 50% of the population. The economy cannot continue to grow on the strength of the top 10-15% of the
10%.
population's demand.
Right. 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 So I think that concludes, sir. Thank you so much for joining. We will be
Thank you. Bye bye.
attaching all of your writings. Thanks, sir. Thanks, sir. Thanks.